Rand trading around 679, 680 this morning, so that weakness remaining with the Rand. If you look at the euro, it's fallen below 130 against the dollar, so the Rand holding up pretty well given the euro's movements.
Morning, Stephen. Yes, we've seen quite a strong comeback in the dollar, primarily because there's been a string of data out this week that has come out consistently higher than market estimates. It started with the ISM at the beginning of the week, then there were factory orders for November, and then of course that all-important ADP report where it showed that hirings in the US were almost 3 times higher than market forecasts. So we've seen quite an improvement in the dollar, and I think issues in the euro zone regarding sovereign debt crisis continue to weigh on the euro, and so of course that's also had an impact on the Rand, which is also drifting weaker.
Just looking at those non-farm payrolls coming out this afternoon, expectations are quite high for those following that ADP report that you mentioned. If we see that number disappointing, do you think we could see a bit of a reversal in the dollar trend at this moment?
I don't think a complete reversal, Stephen. What will be important is to look at what happens to the overall unemployment rate, and particularly that trend. At this point, market consensus expects a decline in the unemployment rate to 9.7%. That's from 9.8% in November, and in fact the 9.8 in November was quite a big increase from the 9.6 of the previous month. So I think as long as there is still a decline in the overall unemployment rate, that will be seen as positive for the US economic recovery, and that will benefit the dollar. Of course, if jobless claims are completely shocking and the unemployment rate inches higher, I think that would definitely be enough to derail the dollar's trend at this point.
Big headline in the Financial Times this morning: Brazil pushing to curb its currency from rising, and what it's doing is it's making domestic banks hold higher reserves to stop any speculative trading against foreign exchange positions. And this follows a move by Chile earlier this week to try and stop further strength in the peso at the same time. And this looks like a trend that is continuing in from last year. Do you think it's going to continue further into this year?
It's difficult to say, Stephen, but what is interesting is that the issue of currency devaluation and global currency wars was quite a big topic towards the end of last year, and then seemed to have fallen off the radar as the sovereign debt crisis in Europe became a bigger and bigger topic. So ultimately there was no real resolution as to how countries were going to manage their currencies and stop this destructive currency war that was going on. So it will certainly be an issue to watch in 2011 to see whether other developing countries continue to follow the lead of Chile and Brazil.
We have had golden forex numbers out of the Reserve Bank this morning, and they show net reserves up by $273 million to $43.4 billion, and that's an increase of 0.6%. Would you have expected a bigger increase in net reserves given the strength we saw in the Rand in December and the government and the Reserve Bank's desire to try and weaken this Rand slightly?
I think that's certainly a valid point, Stephen. It looks like the Reserve Bank, using longer dated FX swaps, bought about $400 million in December, and that's slightly down from the 650 amount that they bought in November. So sure, given the Rand's strength in the month of December, one certainly would have, one could argue that they should have done more in the month. But that said, you know, they continue to be active in the forex market and demonstrated their commitment to trying to temper the Rand's strength.
Vehicle sales numbers for December coming out this afternoon. We had a pretty good rise in vehicle sales in November. Do you think that would have continued through to December? Do you think we might have seen a bit of a deceleration in those sales?
We would expect a bit of a deceleration in December, Stephen, with January then expected to be a much better number. I think generally what would happen is that agencies would restock in the new year, and having such a strong run in November definitely weighs against the chances of there also having been quite a strong uptick in December as well.